I'm joined by Bruce Tretter, Chief Operations Officer and co-owner of VOmax. Thank you so much for joining me, Bruce.
Oh, my pleasure, Daniel. I'm really looking forward to this.
Oh, likewise. Thank you. And just so I can get an idea of what exactly it is that we're talking about, can you briefly describe VOmax?
Yeah, we're a custom performance technical wear manufacturer.
Okay.
And so, what exactly does that mean? Well, first of all, our name, VOmax. Why the name VOmax? Well, VOmax comes from the equation VO2 max. So V and the O are capitalized and then two. So it means the V is maximum and oxygen, and then the O2 is oxygen. So it's the volume. So it's the maximum oxygen consumption during a specified period of peak physical performance. So when a runner is running full on sprinting or running even in distance, very hard, somebody, a hockey player skating really hard, or soccer, all of those, it's maximum performance. So that's where our name is derived from. And it was actually established by an elite cross-country or Nordic skier and cyclist, and then he and his wife was also an avid cyclist, and the two of them started to produce performance wear and using dye sublimation process, which we'll talk about later on. But anyway, it's all about maximum performance. And now, you and I are talking about sustainability and how do we make that maximum performance correspond with sustainability.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's exactly why I wanted to speak with you, is because I think it's really interesting, as we were saying before we started recording, is that VOmax, your company, is in a unique position where you've started on the journey of becoming sustainable. And what you're really looking to do is maximize how you become sustainable as a company. And I really want to learn more about, what that process looks like, because a lot of the people that I've spoken to so far on the podcast, they've already been sort of doing it for a long time. They've already done a lot of things. They've already gone on that journey. But you're it sounds like more towards the beginning steps of that.
Yeah, that's exactly true. And I was not in apparel manufacturing 3 years. Well, 3 years ago I started, and then 2 years ago became co-owner of VOmax when it changed hands.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And and so when I stepped in, I had no idea about how manufacturing works, or apparel manufacturing works. So it's been eye-opening.
Yeah.
And it's been really learning by fire hose. But now that by doing that, by actually doing it, being in the seat and seeing what's going on. I mean, you hear a lot of talks, but over here in the United States, you'll hear talk about bring the jobs back home. Right. Well, it's not just flip the switch and the jobs are coming back home. It's how do we innovate and change our practices to be able to accommodate that? And then currently we have the coronavirus going on,
right,
globally, but mostly focused in the Far East. And China has become the manufacturing plant of the world. And with that, they're manufacturing, but also a lot of our pollution, so we're talking about sustainability, has been offloaded to them. Right. And so they're bearing a good portion of our and the Western world's and the rest of the world's carbon footprint. So now that, I'm looking at how do we change that and also make economic sense out of that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, you've covered a million things there. It's so there's certainly a lot to discuss. I'd like to actually, what I'm really curious to start with, because before we dig into the details, I'm actually really interested in knowing, how did you decide to start this journey? Because it seems like a big shift, because you were saying that the company's been around for 38 years, was it?
38 years. Yeah. It was established in 1982. Yep.
Right. So and now all of a sudden you're kind of coming in 3 years ago, so 35 years in, saying, let's completely change the way we do business.
Yeah, that's correct.
So I'm just curious to know, how did that conversation actually happen, or what was going on that brought you to this point where you're saying, okay, it's time for us to be sustainable?
Right. Well, we have talked about it and we've marketed just a little bit that we can use eco-friendly materials. And so that means recycled polyester that comes from plastic bottles that have been recycled and broken down and then turned into threads and then into fabrics. But we hadn't had very much interest and really hadn't pushed it that hard. And then we had the opportunity to acquire the rights to sell products made by a company called Attain. They're based in Maine, and their niche market is specifically sustainability, or using sustainable products. So using recycled polyester, and they only use really one fabric to make running tops. And so a running top like this is called a singlet, which is just a strapped piece. Now this is one of my pieces, and it's made with traditional polyester.
So bright.
But theirs is, and that's to help people see you when you're out, and improve safety, which is a big reason that I got into this business. I'm a roadie. I cycle on the road, and then I run on the road to get to trails, or we'll just run on the road. But I prefer running trails anyway. So that's the traditional polyester, and now Attain uses it's entirely U.S. made, because they use sustainable or recycled polyester that's manufactured in the United States.
And do they get the plastic that they're recycling also locally or from the U.S.?
Yes, right. You're right. It's all locally derived. And
okay.
it used to be that until fairly recently, I think about a year or so ago, a lot of our recyclables were transported to China. So that means you take those pieces, you put them on some conveyance ship, and then use the energy to send it to China. And then China was using that to make recycled products, textile products and other products. And they then shut that down. They said no more. And so now that stuff is residing here. But anyway, the Attain products are all sourced. We've gotten certificates on that. We've needed to do that to comply with the Federal Trade Commission.
Oh, wow.
And so that's what they do. And I like that model. I also like the people who are the companies that we've been working with, the customers who we've been working with, who are engaged. So engaged and dedicated to sustainability.
Yeah, that's really cool. And so so that's how you got here. And I guess why is it important to you? I mean, what was that push where you said, this is something that we need to do as a company? And
well, right, exactly, Dan. I mean, as you mentioned at the start of this, we're just getting started going down this road. And for me personally, I'm learning have learned a good deal of this process. I have a lot more to learn, which I love. I love lifelong learning. But when it comes to sustainability, it's about how do we do that most effectively and efficiently, both as far as the materials we use, the process that we use, and then how we engage customers and make it economically viable.
Yeah.
And so what we're looking at right now, our factory suffered catastrophic water damage in the middle of December. There was a water pipe break on, of course, the third floor on a weekend. So the guts of the building were damaged and actually beyond repair.
Wow.
And so it meant that no matter what, we were going to have to move our facility, move our manufacturing facility. Our offices had to move immediately. But I looked at that, as the water was coming out of the ceiling, I go, okay, you know what? We have to leave this place, and let's make the most of this. And let's find out what we can do to improve our manufacturing capability, make more sense. So it's about also improving efficiency in process. I mean, we had discussed earlier, what else do you do regarding sustainability? Well, I'm here in a turtleneck and a sweater and all that. It is pretty cool up here in the Northeast. I just came from down south, and but I keep the temperature down in my apartment where I live. I'm very attentive to, you don't see any lights on here because the sun is out.
Right.
My computer's on, and it is charging right now, but I really keep my power use down as much as possible. And I have to say, with a caveat, except for driving, I have a very long commute, and I've been trying to cut back on my commuting, the days that I actually do that commute. But I just drove down south and back here, well over 3,000 miles over the last 2 weeks. That's not sustainable. And the trip was about finding a new site and, exploring new sites and where we might be able to go to reduce our total carbon footprint. And so I think we'll talk about later on, how do you actually go about doing that? Yeah. So it's really, I look at it comprehensively, and then use, so it's a comprehensive approach to sustainability.
Yeah.
And then, and we'll talk specifically about how to get at that. But yes, we are just starting out on that, and it's something that I look at holistically.
So Attain is the first step, at least from what I understand, of that journey, right? So Attain is the company that VOmax purchased, was it?
Well, we didn't purchase the company. So the two owners still have it, Jeremy Litchfield and Rebecca Dar, their husband and wife team. They still own the name, and they still own the trademark. We acquired the rights to license that and to sell their products, manufacture them. So we make them. I mean, they were never hands-on manufacturing. They contracted their manufacturing. We do the manufacturing now.
I see.
And and so yes. So Attain is our first step for concrete step forward, and then legitimate program. We have web stores on our site where people come in and buy their pieces that are actually sold through another party, or connected to another party. So yes, but that's our first solid concrete step and most recent step.
So okay, so that's recycled polyester, and
yes.
So that's, I guess, for me, the first thing I think of is recycled polyester means that you're diverting plastic potentially from landfill.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, the EPA says 5% of our landfills are textile related, from junk, and we throw out about 13 million tons of textiles every year. A lot of that goes in the ocean, and I remember
textiles being like clothes.
You're right. Clothing, fabric. Right. And so it could be clothing, it can also be things like upholstery on furniture, anything that's fabric, that's fabric derived, curtains, that comes from that. Yeah. All that, those are textiles. And so,
wow.
But it's a lot of stuff that goes in the trash, and that is not sustainable.
Right.
And, it affects our whole ecosystem.
So how does using that recycled polyester, where does that piece come in terms of?
It's less energy reliant than creating virgin polyester. And polyester, where does that come from? It's an oil-based product. So it's an interesting product, because you extract it out of the ground, the oil out of the ground, and then you're making the polyester itself, and then that polyester has to be turned into something. So you're using energy to create the threads, then to create the fabrics, and then to actually manufacture the products. All of those are energy dependent. And then when you're finally finished, you have to ship it someplace. That's energy dependent too. So the energy dependency, the chain is rather long when it comes to using polyester. And I mean, it would be the same for a paper product, only that you're using wood instead of an oil-based natural resource. But yeah, it's the whole industry is very interesting to see, how that all works. And polyester, it's kind of if you liken it to the food industry, corn is probably the number one product used in everything. You see high fructose corn syrup, which is not much different than sucrose. It's glucose and fructose together. It's just that it's a highly concentrated form. It's relatively inexpensive to make. So it's in everything.
Right.
It's not good that's not sustainable either. But oil, polyester has become very popular because of its performance characteristics. When it first came out, it was like wearing a bag, and a plastic bag. But now they've manipulated the polyester as far as the weave goes. So if you can have a different weave, the fabric itself. I'll use a different piece here. I'll use something totally different color. But you can have things like mesh in there. You can have materials that on the face next to your skin has a tight weave, and then on the outside has a wider weave, so that it draws the water. Uses osmosis or transpiration. Pulls the water away from your body, and then it allows it to evaporate. So it's not that old bag that we used to have. But again, it's made from those same materials. So, oil-based materials. How do we reduce the use or improve the use of that?
Yeah, well, that's really cool. And you were mentioning the chain, so that's
Yeah.
the supply chain, and
Yeah.
towards the beginning, you were talking about bringing jobs back home
Right.
and going somewhere local instead of manufacturing in China.
Yeah. So, when it comes to, all right, how do you make this work? In addition to the material itself. So if you use recycled polyester, you're using the resource itself that's already been used, and then reusing it.
Hmm.
So breaking down the fibers, or breaking down the water bottles into, and then creating a fiber out of that, which is less energy intensive than the virgin material. But then there's the process. How do you actually manufacture it? Once you have the material, well, first of all, acquiring that material, what does your supply chain look like?
Yeah.
And what I would like to do, what our company would like to do, is to shorten the supplier chain so that the material comes more locally. And then how can we engage US manufacturers? I mean, right now, the gross lion's share of performance materials are made overseas, made in China, mostly. Some are made in Italy, and in the cycling and performance world, people hear Italy and they equate Italy with cycling and with performance sports.
Okay.
But how can we shorten that supply chain for a couple of reasons? First of all, sustainability, but for also economics. Look, with the coronavirus right now, we're seeing a significant data point. I mean, and it has had significant economic implications. Our stock market has been doing this, and predominantly this,
Yeah,
over the
going down.
last week and a half. Yeah. And so it has a not just a temporary effect, but a much longer term effect. So with that information in hand, how can we improve what we do holistically? So as far as actually acquiring the resource to make the fabrics themselves, and then can we manufacture them in a more and have that material more readily accessible, so closer, so it doesn't have to incur such a transportation, carbon footprint via transportation. And then how can we improve our manufacturing process to make sure that the material, the material is used
Yeah.
as effectively and efficiently as possible with minimal waste. Even if
Mm,
you're going to recycle it, still minimize waste, because no matter what, waste always requires energy.
yeah.
So
And
it's a whole process.
so, what are some? I mean, what are some of the, on a high level? Like, well, I guess, you know, I always like to go for the. I think it makes sense to start with the low hanging fruit when
Yes.
you're doing something like this, just to start getting some easy wins in the bank. So, where are some of those easy wins?
The easy wins are actually acquiring eco-friendly materials. So
Which is what
using,
you've done with the
yeah,
team.
so you go, okay, that stuff is sourced. We have domestic sourcing. We also have international sourcing, or non-domestic sourcing, meaning we have mills, in the country and outside of the country to acquire them. If you acquire them inside the country, it's more sustainable because you have less of a transportation energy footprint.
Right.
And so that's the first place. And then in the process itself, when you're using the material, so the material comes in a roll, like, a roll of paper towels, let's say, it
Hmm.
looks very much like that. Then making sure that when you cut the pieces out, so it's like cookie cutting, you
Yeah.
make sure that you minimize the waste, it's called, when you put the pieces together. So you might have pieces like that, but when you put them on the paper, or however you're going to cut them, and put the pieces close together, so there's a minimal space between one piece and the other, and then
So
cut
as
and
much of the
minimize
fabric as possible.
exactly. So as much of the fabric as possible
Yeah.
goes into the product, not on the floor. And
Is there
then,
opportunity to use, because obviously you can't use every single last square inch. Is
no.
there any opportunity to do something with that waste?
Oh, for sure, to recycle it. So that happens too. Those fibers and we were just talking with a lab down in North Carolina
Mm,
that helps to, and there are other labs that look at, all right, how do we take that material and either use a very specific. So only, let's say, only the material that comes off of this, would this type of material would be recycled but there are also ways of taking other material, like, here's paper waste to end this, and then it's all put in one hopper and then shredded and used for a different purpose.
Oh, wow.
But all of that stuff is being researched, and they're applying that research to practical, using that practically.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that's in its very early stages.
Yeah.
And so it's about how do we drive that. And I think what's really important is telling the story about what we're doing. Why is this important? And I mean, the evidence, I think we can say, is extraordinarily clear that climate change is happening. And all you have to go to lowlands like in Florida or Louisiana and see land being absorbed by the ocean. And and that's not coming back unless we do something, turn things around. But that's a huge stretch. It's about actually minimizing the effects right now. And so but for people to say, I really want that, instead of saying, oh yeah, and the material might be more expensive. It's about bringing the cost of that down. It's it's economy of scale, and being able to bring that down, and bring the process down. So
in terms of the economics, I mean, and that was something you said at the beginning, and it's something that I've always said from as soon as I got interested in sustainability. One thing that I realized very quickly is that it only will work in terms of any company being sustainable, any kind of technological advancements actually taking hold. It'll only work if the financial aspect of it makes sense. I mean, if every company that starts becoming sustainable sort of for the good of it, so to speak, instantly becomes unprofitable and starts losing money, then that's not sustainable either from a financial aspect. So I think, it seems like a lot of what you're saying is it's looking into ways to be environmentally friendly while making sure that it actually makes economic sense.
Absolutely. And I look at something, especially in performance sports, as an opportunity, as a significant stepping stone, or a way to really drive. I call it a point of approach into the problem. So if the problem's big like this, finding a wedge that you can get in and
like
start to approach. Right, exactly. And then from that to be able to expand.
Yeah.
So with performance sports, I mean, who's doing performance sports right now? It's younger people. I mean, I like to tell myself that I'm still an 18-year-old. The only time I don't quite believe that is when I get in front of the mirror to shave. That also keeps me away from mirrors. But that spirit, though, is still very much alive. So how do I can't stand it if I leave a light on somewhere, or I go, come on. And so that doesn't happen very much at all. I mean, I have evidence. My power company sends, I'm sure you've heard about this stuff, where they'll send you a letter. I think it should just be an email, actually, but saying, and I think I do get it in email, but also get a hard copy, but telling me how my energy usage compares to my neighbors, and I'm always on the very green side, or you're doing better than your neighbors, and it makes sense because I keep my energy down here. I have a programmable thermostat, and most people do, but make sure to keep it really cool. Like when I was away for 2 weeks, I got home last night, it was darn chilly here. Well, fine. Yeah. That's exactly how it should be. And but it's about engaging people, and specifically engaging people your age. And all right, what do you want to do? You want to, millennials, Gen X, Gen Y, and all the younger people are looking at, they're taking this more seriously than we are. So my generation, and it's about, okay, connecting with them, and how are we doing this, and then telling our story, and having people involved in these sports or these activities saying, I want this is what I want. Well, the market is going to drive what's actually produced. So if there's more pressure put on the market to create those products will be produced. And there's a line that I gave you that I believe in strongly. We have to be the change we need.
Right.
Don't rely on anybody else to do that. It's not happening. Government, you can hear all the stuff that goes on politically, and I've been involved in local politics for a long time, but it's about taking that responsibility to be the change that we need.
Yeah. I
And
think that's great.
yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
but if you connect that way, so if somebody is an avid cyclist, well, they're out there, out in the open, so they're recognizing the junk that's on the road. I mean, it's
Yeah.
again, it's a holistic problem. What are they breathing in? If they're in the city and you're using your VOmax, how much of that O2 is really O2 that you're sucking in, and what's the ratio of that to other stuff that's coming out of cars or what anywhere else?
Yeah.
And so it's really important to connect those dots to say, oh, right, this is really an ecosystem. And so it's ecological, but it's also economical. So going both ways.
Yeah.
And you're exactly right. If it makes no economic sense, it's not going anywhere. And you hear politicians say, oh yeah, it's going to create so many jobs. You go, okay, fine, that's great. But instead of a sound bite, let's actually get a bite into the problem, and let's see how that actually works.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I'm curious about, because you're saying that performance sports, it's attracting kind of the younger generation. So does that mean that it's from your point of view as an owner of a company, is it becoming necessary to move down this path? Because is that sort of what the next generation of your customers are expecting you to do?
Well, I'll tell you what, that to me, that's a bit of a question mark. And I think it's really about telling the story of what we're doing and why we're doing this, and engage people who are like-minded, who recognize that, and then can actually influence the game. And I don't mean it as a game like a play, but be involved in the whole process.
Right.
And I think with that, there's something that I just realized, or was alerted to yesterday, when we're looking at moving our manufacturing facility, or having other manufacturing facilities. But the huge question is actual skilled labor, people who can operate the machines that we use to make our products.
Right.
And so I call our process a merger between 21st and 17th and 18th century technology, because our images, like whenever we do a graphic design, like let's say we put this panel to this star here, the material starts out like that, white, right? And so the print is only on the outside of the material, and it actually the ink impregnates the fiber. So it goes from the ink from a paper pressed onto the so the paper goes onto the cut fabric pieces, heat's applied, the ink goes from a solid to a gas. That's where sublimation comes in.
Okay.
And then the ink impregnates the fibers and doesn't sit on top. It actually goes into the fibers, so and only goes in so far, so that the fabric retains its performance features: wicking, moisture wicking, drying, cooling, all of that stuff.
That process sort of reminds me of when you're a kid and you do those little temporary tattoos.
Yeah. Exactly. From the paper, you use the
exactly.
paper.
Just put it, and you have to hold it and press kind of hard, and maybe rub it a little bit, and then when you let go, it's off the paper and it's on your skin.
And it's on you. Yeah, exactly. So that's similar, although sometimes there's a paint that sits on top. And so the difference between what you were talking about are having that residue. It's like when you get a silkscreen shirt, that's a rubbery paint that's put on, or ink that's put on top. And if you ever see somebody who's exercised using a cotton shirt that has silk screening on it, you'll see the sweat starts at the silk screen, where the print is, because that's rubber. And so it's like those old polyester shirts where that's a bag that you put on. And so this is completely breathable. So we're looking at, we have to have people, who can actually operate our equipment.
Right.
And demographically, there have been people, they're mostly women, they're mostly immigrants, but they're also aging out. So they're the mother of the youth, or the grandmothers of the youth, and youth isn't coming into the game. But I was talking with somebody yesterday down in North Carolina and they were talking about how they've been talking to youth and bringing them into plants to say, no, manufacturing has changed. And so we use a different process. The buildings look different. And I mean, some of these buildings, some of the factories you go into, most of the factories I go into, the buildings were built around the time of the Civil War here, so in the mid to late 1800s. And then the machinery is more up to date, but still not very new. And that's being updated and modernized, but there's an expense to that. And so it doesn't look very appealing, especially to youth. I mean, I'm looking at the background that you have in your place, and it looks nice and fresh. You've got the plant on one side to you and a white wall, and it looks very nice. But how do we improve that and then engage people and say, youth, that no, this isn't the factory that you see in black and white pictures. This is an up-to-date, modernized factory. And then I look at, when I was out on the road, I was going to restaurants. When I was with other people that I was meeting with, we'd go to restaurants. I actually try to eat as much as I can in the hotel and go to the grocery store and sustain. I told you about bringing my own bowl, right?
Yeah.
Because I can't stand the paper stuff. But I'm looking at who is in these, who's serving us. Who's putting our meals together? A lot of young people. Where are those jobs taking them? Really nowhere, unless they're going to open up a restaurant. And then where are they? They're in places where there's a lot of outdoor activity, and you can see in the shirts they wear that they are inclined to do those activities. Now, how can you engage them and say, look, here is an industry that we're trying to revitalize here in the United States, and how do we get youth involved and go, you can actually, you do this sport, you do cycling, terrific. And you want to design something? All right, but look, let's design with an eye for production. So learn how to do this stuff. So then when you get into it, and if you want to continue on, move up a career ladder into design, into management, now you actually know what that means. Right. And and in the same manner, how do we do this stuff sustainably? So if you bring people in and go, all right, hey, you guys are using this stuff, this oil product, that's crazy. Okay, talk is fine, but now you have an opportunity to change the game. So again, when I mentioned holistically, it's looking at the problem comprehensively, but you can't bite the whole thing off like that. You got to find points of approach. So how do you get into that, and make those approaches, and then start to expand influence based on what you learn. And so, learn and adapt. And so I think that's, and and that's off the top of my head, which is plain to see. But it's, how do we start that engagement, and then keep an eye on the macro problem, so the whole, the comprehensive problem, but also find micro solutions to that, and keep chipping away, and then find ways to achieve some victories. Like you were talking about low-hanging fruit. How do we actually start to harvest that, and then be able to tell the story about it? And I find that very exciting, and it is extraordinarily timely.
Yeah, I think now is the absolute right time to do it. What would you say is, from all of this, because there's, like you said, first of all, it's a holistic process, it's a holistic challenge, and it has to be, therefore, a holistic approach.
Right.
Where would you say, from your experience, in terms of but moving in this direction to be more environmentally friendly, where are the biggest challenges that you're facing? Is it the telling the story and getting people interested, or is it more on kind of logistics of actually how things are made and where it comes from?
All of those come into play, but I think the biggest challenge, or the place to start, is what is the market looking at, and what type of market are we serving? So when my focus, our company also does fashion wear. Okay. And my focus is more on the performance wear, because that's what I do. I mean, I'm an avid cyclist. I've become a born again, I call it, scrappy runner, because I'm not very fast. But it's about how do we put this together? How does this stuff wear and feel? Like this material right here, which is a two-way stretch material. I've paid to make shirts like this for running and also for cycling. But I find that after I go for a run and I want to pulling the thing on isn't so bad. But after I get done with a run and I'm sweaty and I try to pull the thing off and I go, come on, and I can hear the threads popping. It's my own shirt that I've made, that I developed myself.
Yeah.
And then I contrast that with this material, this 4-way stretch material that's much lighter. And I go, this whoop comes off my body when I'm done, straight into the sink, hand washed. And but I go, this is what we're going to make the thing with. Okay.
Right.
The cost, now there's a material cost to it also, and this is more expensive material, but it's about knowing what this stuff is and practicing that. So that's more my forte. I mean, you can see how stylishly I'm dressed. This is all, this is from REI, Recreational Equipment Incorporated. It's an outdoor sports place, and like for skiing, and a cotton T-shirt underneath that. But that's my fashion, and but that's what I live. That's what I do.
Yeah.
And so let's focus on this. And these are also the people who are engaged in the outdoors. They're going kayaking, they're going hiking, and they're enjoying that. But I know they're also seeing junk along the way. Trash in the water. They're seeing trash on the trails or on the road. And so, okay, we want to, and instead of just complaining about it, what can you actually do to make that change? And as a consumer, you can consume products that are different, and you have to educate that, let people know this stuff is available. But it's really tying into that market. And instead of taking a gigantic leap, and say, oh, well, this is what we're doing, we're being sort of high-minded about it. No, we're not getting there. But if you bring that down closer, you go, here's a step. This is like that. I mean, this material right here, this traditional poly, we can also make this stuff with sustainable polyester or perhaps a different material, but it's readily available. You don't have to make that huge leap. Okay, that's that starts to make sense from a practical point of view. And then if you can price it out and manufacture it at a competitive price, now it makes economic sense.
Right.
And then it's about engaging them, and our generations that are younger than I am are more likely to to reach into their pocket and go, hey, you know what, I just got this really cool thing, and then boom, the message gets out to a lot of people. And so it's taking, and I don't mean this in a negative way, like using somebody, but it's taking advantage of the modes of communication, the buying practices that are currently out there, and then leveraging those. Now, those all sound like that's not those can have an unintended, not kind intonation or sound, but it's about
I guess it's speaking the language of
your
exactly. Intended audience.
What are they doing? And yesterday when I was talking about heard what was going on in the manufacturing world from a company it's called the Manufacturing Support Center in Conover, North Carolina, so outside of Charlotte, an hour or so outside of Charlotte. And there was a guy my age who coaches sports, coaches swimming, and he was talking with youth about what's going on. He also brings middle schoolers, so 7th and 8th graders, through this manufacturing support center to show them modern manufacturing. This is what it's all about. And, this is not your parents or grandparents manufacturing.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh man, so initially, especially for us starting up a new factory, you have to have people who are established. So the older generation that actually knows how to do this stuff, train them specifically to sew this type of work, to manufacture this type of stuff. But when you look at, okay, what's the next generation going to be, and start to bring them in and show them, here is a career path. There's actually a work that you can take on that leads to a career.
Yeah.
And with much more opportunities than making a sandwich in a sandwich shop. So how can we engage them? And a lot of the youth that are doing those types of that type of work. I mean, I have 2 sons in their 20s, mid to late 20s, who've experienced exactly that. They have degrees, but they're doing something else for personal reasons or personal interest reasons, but they're supporting themselves with labor, hourly labor. Like that. And so how can you get into a business where you might start out hourly, but the career growth is something totally different, and then tie into that all right, let's make that sustainable. Let's improve. So we have that point of approach, but now let's start to expand that
Right.
in multiple, again, holistically on a bunch of different tiers.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting way to do it, because it's not just the people who are purchasing, but it's
No,
also the people who are actually going to be working and creating the products.
exactly. And if you have people who are involved, let's say in performance sports, I'll just use kayaking, for
Yeah.
example. And so they're involved in that. And then they're actually involved in making the products. And we're
Hmm.
working, let's say, there's a kayak company that makes the actual boats. They make the kayaks.
Yeah.
Okay, great. How can we help you? What type of wear would work well with that? And then how can we do that in both in a performance, from a performance point of view, but also sustainably, and work together. So we're not competing with you. We're supporting each other. You make
Right.
one product, we make another product. How do we work together?
And
And by
one
the
needs
way,
the
can
other.
that,
Yeah.
yeah, can that kayak be made out of materials that are more
Exactly.
sustainable?
Yeah.
Because they're also made out of plastic. And so I look at seeing the whole problem. And yesterday, when we had this discussion, the glow on people's faces, now they were mostly my generation, or just a little bit younger, but the look on their face and their contribution. So it wasn't just, oh, I'm listening to something and reacting, but their contribution to that. Yeah, how can we collectively take these ideas and then magnify them and then apply them?
Hmm.
And I'm going, all right, that's where we need to go. And when
Right.
people have that visceral sense about, all right, this is what we can do, and it's not a pipe dream, but we're going to take a step up approach to it, then it becomes more viable. And so, yeah, I think, I, I mean, there's no doubt that we have to make a change, because I mean, 5 years ago, the guess was, okay, we can go up, 1.5 degrees Celsius, so it's up like 2.5 degrees Fahrenheit over the next, like to 2050, and now it's no. That the time frame has to be shrunk considerably for us to
Right.
have an effect that's that is um, that moderates the problem that we have right now, before it's already racing ahead at
Yeah.
an incredible pace. So
And on
the
that,
urgency is there, and now we
absolutely. Yeah,
and
I think you're absolutely right. It's the urgency is there, and I think it's important for companies to make a change like you're doing. I also think, and this is one question I really like to ask, just to be inspired. And you've already listed off a number of these things, but maybe you have some more to add to that list in terms of what you personally do in your day-to-day life. I mean, so one of the things you mentioned is no lights on when you don't need them, and keep the heating low. I mean, what are some of the other things that on a day-to-day basis, aside from, outside of VOmax, that you do to be environmentally friendly?
well, if I can not, one of my favorite sights is to see my car parked
Yeah.
in the parking lot. And then, to be quite blunt, I use my car way too much, because the factory, I invested into the business. The business is currently in Northampton, Massachusetts. It's on the western side of the state. I live 30 miles from Boston, so I'm on the eastern side of the state. Even
Right.
though they call it central Massachusetts, I'm on the eastern side of the state. My commute to and from work is 160 miles.
Wow.
That's ridiculous. Yes. And so I go, all right, I can't, it's economically draining, financially draining,
Yeah, it's a lot of
and
driving. Yeah.
wherever the money comes from. And right now, as an owner, the luxury of being an owner is you get to pay to work. Terrific. And so it's about turning that around, but it's not economically sustainable, and it's not environmentally sustainable. And so I've been trying to, working on, all right, I'm going to work from home, where I'm actually more efficient when I can be at home and just stay focused
Yeah.
on what I need to get done. But I also have to be there, have a presence. And so it's looking at how and one of the things about moving, wherever we go, I'll then move from where I am. I mean, I can't stay here, especially if we move to another state, but move, and then be close enough, ideally be close enough to our operations, that I can either walk or ride the
Wow.
bike. I mean, if I can walk, that means I can also ride the bike, but then in inclement weather, I can still get there by
Hmm.
foot, or at the very worst, have a much shorter drive.
Yeah.
So those are things that I'm constantly and cognitively aware of.
I think that's a really good, yeah, it's a really good point. And one thing I'm noticing is when I was living in LA, I mean, before I moved to London, you had to drive. There's almost
Yeah.
no other option.
No, and it's horrible. I lived in
Yeah.
LA, in West LA myself, and
Okay, yeah, we're probably in a similar spot.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's especially if you have to go anywhere outside of West LA,
Yep.
then you're going to be in your car for a minimum of 45 minutes to an hour.
Oh yeah, and probably not moving a lot either.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, horrible.
Yeah, exactly. And it's amazing now living here in London, being able to just walk places or take public transportation. There's a lot of freedom, I would say, um, just to not have to worry about your car and
Yeah,
and to not plan your life around your car it's really nice. Even the environmental aspects aside, it's just the freedom to sort of just say, the public transportation here in London is fantastic. I know that
yeah.
wherever I go, there's always going to be a way to get back home, and I
Mhm.
don't need to worry about parking or moving my car from one spot to another. And it feels kind of emotionally, there's more sort of emotional freedom almost as well, in addition to the fact that you just don't have to drive as much.
Yeah, and right, and I agree.
Yeah.
And your generation and even those younger are looking at that actively with where they want to live, where they want to
Mhm.
work, putting that all together.
Yeah,
And so I think that that's vitally important. And that also has an economic effect.
that's
Not
true.
wanting to buy a car, not wanting to buy oil to drive to propel the car.
Yep.
And so it's about extending that out holistic also into wear. And then also finding ways to, if you're going to get something, like the amount of people, buy clothing and then throw it out in a very short period of
Yeah,
time. And the amount of waste is tremendous. I mean, they say something like 70 pounds a year per person, and
it's
that's an
incredible.
inordinate amount. But yes, and it so Daniel, you're entirely correct. But it's the whole perspective, and then what we can do together to make the most of that.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. So where can people find VOmax, and if they want to buy some great sustainable performance wear, where can we go to get some of that?
Well, you can go to our website, and people say, "Yeah, go to the website." Great, and our website is a lot better than it used to be, and we're actively going to the next level. We have the
Awesome.
next version that will come out soon that will be more user friendly, and so it's very easy. It's just VOmax.com, easy. But what you can do is I've had my phone number and email on billboards around here for stuff that I've done in my town, and I'm absolutely fine with that. But my work or my VOmax email is my first initial and last name, so btretter@vomax.com. So that's really easy.
Awesome.
And my phone number is 508-446-7790. And you can text or call that. It's my cell phone. You can text or call that. And what I find most fun in this, so engaging with customers, is actually engaging with them, talking with them.
Yeah,
And if they send an email or they go through the website, that's another step to go through. But if people contact me directly, I get right back to them
that's awesome.
and help them that way. And then we have partners that we're working with. Like, for example, there's a company up in Maine. It's a run store, and they also have a web store presence on our site at Crow Athletics.
Mm.
And Gary Allen, the guy who owns that and runs their program, has been a terrific partner. That came over from Attain, so we were
All
introduced
right.
to
Okay.
them through Attain, from Jeremy and Becca, and I've had a lot of fun talking with him. And sometimes there have been problems that we've had, but he's understood. Okay, here's how we're going to make. Here's what we need to do to fix that,
Hmm.
and then do that. And so there we have, so right now, Gary and Crow only, as far as the run tops that they get from us, they're only using the Attain or the recycled poly
Cool.
products. Yeah. And so I would like to look at finding some more performance material, because the material, the poly that they use is this 2-way stretch, which is okay, but I would like to find some 4-way stretch that's lighter and more conducive to running and performance sports.
The 4-way stretch is the one you were saying is much easier to take off.
It's easier to take off. It also, if I don't know if I get close enough, if you can see the perforations in it.
Oh, so, yeah, it has the little holes in it.
Yeah, right. And so it's a lighter material. It's more breathable, and it feels like a second skin you don't even notice is on your body, and it performs very well. But if we can find a sustainable material to do that, and when I was in North Carolina and South Carolina they have both testing or development capabilities, and then a lot of mills in the area that are manufacturing textiles. And again, for the performance sportswear, most companies, the predominant source is overseas. So how can we start to bring that back home and really make both practical and economic sense out of that?
Yeah, well, best of luck on your journey. I mean, it sounds like you have you've made a really good start, and now you've got your work cut out ahead of you to keep moving in that wedge and make the wedge much bigger.
Absolutely, and yes, the work is, there's plenty to cut out.
Yeah, and so yeah, best of luck on your journey. We're all rooting for you, and thank you so much for your time today, Bruce. Really appreciate it.
Oh, Daniel, I really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun.
Likewise, yeah. All right, take care, Bruce.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, give us a 5-star rating, and also please subscribe, whether on your podcast app or on YouTube, and that way you can be the first to know about new episodes. Thank you very much, and talk to you soon.